This episode of From Angel to Exit is brought to you by Align 5. Align 5 specializes in mergers and acquisitions for growth-focused entrepreneurs and family businesses. With decades of buy and sell side experience, they prioritize client alignment, avoiding conflicts of interest common in other firms. Align 5 delivers above average industry results by customizing strategies for diverse industries, ensuring optimal valuations and securing strategic acquisitions or exit partners. If you want to find out more, check out align5.com. That's align5.com. And now, on to our episode. Are you serious about planning a successful business exit? From Angel to Exit is your go-to resource. Subscribe to our newsletter at eckfeldt.com/podcast for even more valuable insights. And to get personalized guidance, take our free exit readiness assessment. It's just 24 questions, and it will give you a clear picture of your exit readiness. Find the assessment at eckfeldt.com/exit. Submit your results, and we'll schedule a free follow-up call to discuss your specific situation and the best way to maximize your valuation and ensure a successful transaction. Now, back to the episode. Welcome, everyone. This is From Angel to Exit. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. Excited for this program, excited for this episode. Our guest today is Vlada Lotkina. We're going to hear about her story. And actually, I'm excited for this because it's very similar from my story. Coming out of consulting, founding a company, exiting a company, figuring out what to do next. And so I'm really excited for the conversation. I'm excited to kind of hear what she's really kind of learned, not only about business, but about herself as a leader and kind of where she's going now that she's gone through this process. So with all that, Vlada, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm excited to be here, and I think you hit it exactly right, about your personal evolution through the journey. I think that's the most interesting part, at least to me, on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we continue to learn.
Exactly.
That process, we realize, never stops.
That keeps on giving.
Exactly. So before we hear about the exit and the company, let's get a little background. I'm always curious what kind of led up to people becoming entrepreneurs or getting into entrepreneur situations. Give us a little kind of personal, professional background before we dig into the company itself.
Sure. I'm originally from Ukraine, and I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. Once USSR collapsed, my dad became a crazy entrepreneur who started probably 10 companies or so, because you could be first to market in pretty much any category, right? There was no private property until then. And so that was a fascinating experience as a kid growing up. And I went from helping him sell tickets in a cinema that he set up with DVR that he brought from US. To running some real estate development projects and a hodgepodge of other things as I was studying in Ukraine. And so I saw and felt the thrill of it. I felt it's a lot of hard work, but it was so fun. I just had this feeling of creating something from nothing, and that just planted this bug in me. Yeah. But I also felt that I didn't want to do that in Ukraine because not only you had to find, as I say, the problem that people, really want solved and pay you for it, but there are so many other complexities, regulatory and a variety of other things that I will not go into in this podcast. But I wanted to build kind of a world of my own, if you will. And so the whole world is my playground. And that brought me to applying to business schools in the US, which I thought would be a great transition. So I applied to top 3 schools, got into Wharton, shipped myself to US. And of course, I didn't have documents yet to be entrepreneur right away. And back in the day, it wasn't that sexy to be entrepreneur. Everyone from Wharton went to banking or consulting or whatnot. And I was like, oh, now I'm going to learn the proper way, and which to me meant big company way. And so, of course, I went to Boston Consulting Group so I can help big companies become bigger. Soon I realized how much of what's actually been dreamt never gets implemented, and a lot of issues with that. Then I had an opportunity to join internal strategy team at EMC that then was bought by Dell. and climbed corporate ladder actually 2 levels down from Michael Dell, which was a fantastic experience. More hands-on, so it was still strategy work, product growth work, but inside a tech company. And then finally, I had my green card and I had my documents, and I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to go back to my roots, and I felt kind of now or never moment, because I think you get comfortable at a certain point with, what they call golden handcuffs, right? When you just have this great salary and benefits and all of this, and you work, but not the kind of endless stress that you go through as entrepreneur, to meet your payrolls every month and whatnot. And so I, for some reason, felt that was the moment when I was still crazy enough to just do it, despite having a small daughter at home and, living in the middle of Manhattan, which was obviously not the cheapest place to live in. And the problem I found as entrepreneur was related to being a mom, which was parent communication. So I started receiving communications from her preschool at the time, email flyers, backpack, jam papers, sign up sheets on
folder,
the door.
the red folder you have to open up when they get home.
And I was like, this is crazy. I'm in the middle of New York, and that's what it looks like. I could only imagine the rest of the country. And so that brought me to starting ClassTag, which was sort of my idea to exit journey in EdTech.
Yeah. I'm curious, like when your experience in the Ukraine, watching your father and parents kind of go through this process as a family and stuff, I guess it seems like on one hand it kind of inspired you to become an entrepreneur. Right. Were there any kind of downsides of that, or how was that? Were there any reservations about getting into entrepreneurship because of what you saw or what you experienced early?
That's a great question. I would say in Ukraine, generally speaking, unless back in the day, the only way to make good money was to be entrepreneur. There was just no other option. You can't go and become a CEO executive and just be like have a good living. It just doesn't. Those opportunities didn't exist, right? So I think in a lot of ways, for me, for a long time, that was sort of the only way I saw until I got to US. But I also, what I love about entrepreneurship, and it's a little bit of a masochistic answer perhaps, but what I love about entrepreneurship is that I think that that's a very sort of very honest work, if you will. And the reason I say honest, maybe that's not the right expression, is that nobody cares what is on your resume. Wharton, BCG, whatever awards and accolades, doesn't matter. What matters is how good your last month was, how good your last quarter was, how happy your customers are, what is your hockey stick, can you do it or can you not do it, right? Yeah. And you can put your resume, far in the garbage can, right? And there is something thrilling about it. Of course, it's, again, I think it's a very masochistic way to, to look at the world. Yeah. But I think that's what kind of attracted me to that, which was the same problem I saw with my dad, but I guess I saw the joy in that pain.
Yeah. I always say like entrepreneurs have to be both delusional and masochistic.
Right, exactly.
Because if they're irrational and really didn't like pain, that you would never get into this.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I've had a couple of conversations with folks that are coming out of other countries and other cultures and coming into the U.S. and becoming entrepreneurs. Did you feel, was there a particular draw to the U.S. to be, because that's a very kind of thread in U.S. culture, right? About, everyone has an opportunity, the American dream, right? Everyone becomes an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what your background is. You just, if you can come up with a good idea and you persevere, you'll make a business. I guess how much of this played into kind of coming to the U.S. as being kind of part of that culture, or seeing the culture here being supportive of that?
Yeah. Well, I think U.S. is the land of opportunity and the land of dreams, and I'm certainly very grateful to this country for having me and allowing me to learn and win sometimes. And
sometimes.
I didn't come here specifically with this long-term plan that I will become entrepreneur in the U.S. It just happened so that as I was building corporate career, I found that not to be fulfilling, and I found that I want to sort of go back to my roots. So it was more of a process of self-discovery. But I do find that every time I talk to my European friends or I go back to Europe, it's just not there, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, every market is a smaller market, right? Yep. If you talk about Europe in totality, it becomes an interesting market, but it's not the reality.
Yeah, that's not how you do business.
At the end of the day, in the US, yes, there are regional differences, but it's one market and one market that speaks English. And the fascinating thing about US, obviously, is that whatever the most obscure problem or solution you've got, there is tens of thousands of people who want it, right? No matter how crazy, like today you can come up with the wildest idea and you go to App Store, there are 10 people already doing it, right? Yeah. Which is, which tells you there is demand for it, but it also says, yes, it perhaps is the most competitive market. And so it is harder to stand out. There is more access to capital. So I think there are obviously pros and cons, but I think if you have the kind of ambition and to really build in one of the biggest and most competitive markets in the world, the U.S. is the place to be. Yeah.
So I want to kind of hear a little bit about that moment or the kind of the process or the moment that you decided to really start the company. How, I'm just always curious, like if this is like you wake up one morning and you're like, that's it, I'm doing this, I'm done with these things. Or if this, like, there's a lot of kind of back and forth. It's like, oh, I'm kind of testing the waters. I got to figure out the right time to actually make the jump. What was that process like for you?
Yeah. It is actually really funny because in a way now I'm going through somewhat similar experience, but with way more information and less ignorance than I had back then. But the process was, I would say, not that quick, right? So I started thinking that I want to go back to entrepreneurship. Obviously, it's a very different world from corporate, right? And that's why I think hiring corporate people in a startup world never works, right? Because it's just, there are very few people, I think, not to toot my own horn, that can do both, right? Because it's a very different DNA, right? The early stages of a startup to that. And so I probably explored 4 to 5 different ideas that I dismissed for one reason or the other. Some of them were also in education. Others were in sort of what's trendy at the time, that was crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, and I read like these books on regulation, and then I was like, why in the world would I be the person who revolutionizes crowdfunding? Like, I know nothing about it, right? I read a book, but like, and so I went through a lot of sort of discovery and kind of which idea do you need to pursue, right? And sort of a lot of now it all feels funny and different, of course, having gone through the journey. But back in the day, I every time I saw competitors, I saw this, that, whatever red flags I saw, I turned. And the funny thing was that this idea came from my own experience, right? I experienced that. I didn't think about business model at all, right? Which is silly. As a BCG consultant of many years, I didn't think about it because it's like,
throw it out the window.
Right, throw it out of whatever. Who cares about money? Like, we just build business out of solving problems. And so I think I got frustrated with myself, sort of finding all the problems, and I was like, I'm not gonna look for problems. I'm just gonna do it. And so that was my process. It took me probably about a year to get there. I just decided that I'm gonna do it because that was something I experienced myself, and I couldn't unsee the problem.
It's kind of this like strategic delusional approach. It's like, I mean, it doesn't make sense to do it, but there's a certain amount of, you have to just kind of suspend disbelief around some of this stuff and go into it and then sort of see what happens and then see where you get traction. I guess, how much did you feel like the personal connection to the problem helped you either understand the problem or find solution or just motivate you to solve it? Like, I'm just, because I've seen both cases. I've seen entrepreneurs where it's very personal, sometimes really intense backstories on things. Other times it's like, I don't know, like I look through 100 ideas and this one seemed to have the best, but I don't know anything about it. It's just it's a problem that I think if we solve, we'll make a lot of money. Those are very different kind of approaches to starting companies.
Well, I think for me, certainly it gave me conviction that the problem exists. Of course, I've told a number of stories while I had to about how, truly, it did matter, right?
Yeah.
I know the reason why I feel I was successful, let's say, in all my career leading up to entrepreneurship was because I had access to great education back in Ukraine, and I had tremendously supportive and engaged parents. And by the way, there is so much that goes into parent engagement, from showing up to school because it shows your kid you value education, right, to setting high expectations, right? So there is a whole science that's decades, or hundreds of years old, right, about sort of what it takes, and yet a lot of these things are not happening for many children by well-meaning parents, because they just don't know better.
Yeah,
right?
they don't have the skills and understanding.
Right. And so for me, that was a meaningful, like when I thought about like what made me me, that was like a meaningful part of my story. And I wanted to do the same for my daughter. So I did have my motivation. I wouldn't say, perhaps in the moment I exaggerated that more to make for a good storytelling.
Yep.
But it certainly, I think, first and foremost, gave me conviction. It gave me conviction that this problem exists because I felt it. Unlike a problem that someone else tells me about, it probably will take me talking to 1,000 people or 100 people to say, oh, this is real, because 100 people told me so, right? So I think that conviction part was really key. And the funny thing was that we started ClassTag helping parents become more involved in the kids' education. And so in my earliest days, I interviewed hundreds of parents through mommy groups, etc. So I had a lot of like access to different moms, right? Yeah. And that was kind of my entry point. But the funny thing was that none of that actually helped our growth, because these parents it turned out parents are absolutely powerless when it comes to schools. Or at least they feel powerless, so they would not introduce a tool or app or solution to their teachers in school. So that was a fun fact about solving my own problem, and that sort of brings back to doing discovery properly.
Well, I guess when did you, so what was that early stage of, kind of figuring out the problem, the fit, like how you were going to solve it, what the players and stakeholders were? I guess, at what point did you, or when did you get to the point of feeling like, oh, like I've got something I can scale, right? Like, tell us a little bit about that journey, and when did you kind of reach that point of like, I'm running with this thing?
Yeah. Well, I think one of those qualities which I think are really great and really bad is once I make up my mind about something, you can't stop me. Like there is no single obstacle, right? And that's a good and a bad thing, right?
Like many things in life.
Right, many things in life, right? But in that case, the moment I decided that I'm doing it, there was no stopping, right? Not the fact that 100 parents were absolutely useless in introducing me, not the fact that my first MVP, I paid, I think, $20,000 to this agency in New York that was outsourcing somewhere elsewhere, that never produced anything because they went bankrupt before they created my MVP. That was my early experience.
Oh boy.
Not the fact that I went to, some of the investors I knew from, some Wharton connection and whatnot, and they all, they all basically told me, hey, you have 3 competitors that already raised tens of millions of dollars. So why are you doing this again? What a silly idea, right? I had investors in the early days telling me that they would fund every other idea because I look like a good founder, every other idea except for this one. Right?
We'll give you money, just don't do this one.
Unhelpful things that I think would have probably stopped many people from moving forward. But I just looked at it as a kind of stepping stones on the way.
And in terms of the scaling, once you got some traction, you realize, okay, like I'm in market on this thing. How did you go from kind of local wins or kind of the small wins to validate things to actually scaling it? Because I always find it's like that becomes a different set of challenges.
Yeah,
Like how do I
absolutely.
grow and scale, and whether it's talent or marketing or outreach, like what were the things that became the things you had to overcome?
Yeah, and I think the one of the things I'm seeing a lot of entrepreneurs kind of get wrong is when we talk about product market fit, right? Everyone says, "Oh, it's people can't get enough of your product. They're just pulling the product
Okay.
from you, right? They talk about all this magic land, la la land, where all of this magic is happening,
Yeah.
right? And it sounds fantastic, but I think it also, in a way, does a disservice to entrepreneurs because, yes, that's where ideally you eventually get, but that's not where you start, right? Typically, right? And I
Yeah.
think I've not, and I really hope those experiences exist, and I definitely want to connect with those entrepreneurs and learn more about it. But I have maybe went one who started and sold 4 companies, and she said in one company that happened
Okay.
to her.
Yeah.
But most experiences are very different. Most experiences are when the first 10, 20, 30, 100, depending on B2C or B2B, what number you need, right, is your alpha or beta group. You have to go get by hand through brute force,
Yeah.
right? Whatever that means, either sending thousands of emails or going to 1,000 networking events or blowing up LinkedIn or whatever your approach is, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but it's something that requires a ton of legwork.
Yeah.
Because your product is shaky, it only does one thing, it's not that pretty and attractive, right? They have to convince to get into startup, to be their first customer. And so there is a lot of convincing that needs to go into that. And so that to me has been my experience, like getting this first 100 teachers in New York City by hand. And once I saw these teachers report back to me saying, "Oh my God, I had 10 times more parents show up to my parent-teacher conference than a teacher next door. And then I seen teacher next door sign up for our app because she
Interesting.
saw parents voting with their feet," right? I was like, oh, now, you see the impact, you see the engagement, right? Because in the earliest stages, when it comes to software business in particular, it's all about the value you deliver to your customers,
Yeah.
right? Are actual things happening that you promised, and do how they continue to get deeper and deeper to form habits with your product, right?
Yeah.
And that's why premature scaling until you see those aha moments, it just doesn't make sense. It's wasted resources.
Yeah.
And even though as an entrepreneur, actually, I think one of the biggest mistakes I made in my journey was scaling too quickly,
Yeah.
as many others.
Yeah. Not the first, maybe not the last.
First, not the last.
Yeah.
But I think that's because I think it's lack of clarity with goals, right? I think there is, this mistake that the whole point of startups is growth, which is correct. But when you have something that's worth growing,
Yeah.
not,
Yeah. No,
not
I always say you want to scale success, not problems, right? Like,
Right,
so you put a
exactly.
whole bunch of money against a solution that has a whole bunch of problems in it. You're just going to scale the problems as well.
Right, exactly. And so to answer your question about scaling, that's really where by spending, and I got to spend a lot of time with teachers, and I think that actually what kept me going in that business was that I actually fell in love with teachers. I hired half of my team were teachers.
Nice,
and
yeah.
so our whole marketing and sales and customer success was from teachers to teachers, right? And so it was all very teacher driven because I found that teachers trust other teachers, and
Yeah, no, it's sort of the whole influence cycle of your market, right? It's
Right.
like that was going to be the way in which you actually got the engagement and the support.
Right.
I'm curious, given your background, I mean, I do find sometimes that I'll work with founders who are great at early stage, right? They're really good at kind of coming up with an idea and just getting scrappy and making things work and figuring out the product and then they got to kind of the scaling stage, and then they're kind of fish out of water, right? Like it's a whole different set of things.
Right.
Given your background in having kind of the early scrappy experience, but then also big corporate experience, like how did that serve you as the company grew and the nature of the problems and strategy and organizational development and hiring? Like did you feel that you were kind of pulling in different experiences and background, or where did you feel challenges around that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bruce. And I think first, when I started doing sort of 0 to 1, I actually had to unlearn a lot of the experiences I learned over the last decade, because there were all these corporate experiences that actually hurt me, right? But then I would say once we crossed probably maybe 20 people or so, 15, 20 people, that I was like, oh, that's where I get to, do the all hands.
Flex
and
those muscles.
Planning. Yeah. It's like, now I'm feeling confident in what I'm doing, right? So all of that stuff kind of came back. And, OKRs and goal setting and alignment and, all of those things. But I think it started being helpful maybe after there were like maybe 6 people to some extent. But I think after like, around 15, 20 is like when you start, actually creating more proper org charts and, all of those things. Yeah. But it was funny. I definitely remember that moment. It was like, oh, let me pull that from that book. Yeah.
I love it. And so you started this company with some investors. So there's obviously a certain or a very specific expectation to exit at some point. But I guess tell me a little bit about when you felt like, oh, I now need to start thinking about exactly how and when we're going to exit this company, right? When did that kind of time frame or sense of time frame start coming into play for you?
Yeah. Well, I think entrepreneurship is very opportunistic, right? Meaning you have your strategy, but then there are opportunities, right? Yeah. And so you have to be focused, but also open-minded enough to see those opportunities when they present themselves. And so I would say pretty much at every point when after, seed round, when we started, when we were raising, it was always a natural question to ask, right? Because also I think increasingly there are some investors or that either represent corporate VCs, for example, right, that might have interest in some more strategic alignment, if you will, with that. So it was something we've, talked about at various junctures. I actually, in the journey, and something I share openly, went through one failed M&A that was opportunistic and dropped in my inbox at the time that I was raising. The pretty much a week before war in Ukraine unfolded, where all my development team was, the private equity fund pulled out, and that was a very devastating experience. And then from there on, I think I felt that it made sense because I already went through all that logic as to why it made sense to sell. And we sold 18 months later to different company. Yeah,
in terms of I'm curious with the failed exit, how, like, I guess what did you learn from that, or what did that process teach you about what you needed to do differently the next time an exit opportunity came up?
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how much we learn from failures, right? Right? I think I'm almost in the point of my life when I'm grateful for that, right? Because, and I think that one in particular was so painful that it took me like a really long time to feel gratitude for it. But I think I'm almost there. And what I learned is you run your business. No matter what is going on, fundraise, M&A, I don't know, hurricane, whatever, right? Like, your sole purpose is to continue to grow that business and continue to hit the milestone and exceed the milestones you have. And you can never take your eyes of that goal, right? And I think that was one sort of key lesson learned, because either M&A breaks or M&A, the renegotiation will happen. And if you're not performing according to whatever you put forth as your projections, there's always going to be a downside for you.
Yeah, you're always going to get a haircut.
So that was one. Two was, I think, private equity world in particular, right, is just is made up of people who have a particular profile. And their profile is doing, whatever strictly the ROI is based on whatever the other considerations are, have nothing to do with your company, right? Have to do with the performance of maybe the other company that they want to roll you up with, or performance of their fund, or whatever, right? 100 things, market dynamics, right? Nothing to do with you, right? And so you can't control that, right? And you should expect, there is no nice guys in that business, right? But, I mean, there might be nice guys in their other private life, but they will do
their role as a private equity is not to be a nice guy.
what happened to us was I had a purchase agreement that I was circulating to investors because we were literally days before signing, and they just walked away. And I know at least 5 other founders who had similar experience with different private equity. So it's just because you are in some process doesn't mean anything, right? And again, going back to the first point, and I would say the last bit is not involving your team. In my second process, I said you only get me, maybe my CTO when I decide, and that's it. No one else is involved. They have business to run, and that's it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you're bringing up a couple of points that I just find so consistent in the stories that I've heard and the companies I've worked with, is kind of this dichotomy or this kind of dialectical situation where you need to be running the company, so assuming that you're going to run the company forever, but be prepared to sell at any moment.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. Like, keeping those two things true is hard, right? Because, being prepared to sell, it's like you want to kind of optimize the company, or you want to kind of, hit this peak. But you can't guarantee it. You need to be running, whether the deal falls through and you need to keep running, or they come back and want a haircut and you want to be able to say no. And if you've taken your eye off the ball and have a down quarter, and now you're kind of like, now I need to sell. If you need to sell, that's the worst situation.
They smell blood right away.
Well, and I think the other thing of the private equity, it's just hard. I mean, for many entrepreneurs, this is a once in a lifetime event.
I know.
And for private equity, it's Tuesday. Right. And there's and so it's just the differences of mindset and situations can lead to a lot of pain and frustration. And the more that entrepreneurs can realize that's the case, kind of the less personal they take it. Right. They have to be aware of it and they have to deal with it, but it's less personal, and it's so easy to make these things personal.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about other big lessons, but there are certainly many. And I think, once you persevere one of those, you're good.
Yeah.
You can do it.
So I guess give it just a little details on the exit in terms of the structure of things. Did you stay on? Was there earnouts? Right. Give me a little sense of the nature of the deal and why it landed that way. Was there anything you were trying to get you didn't get? I'm curious about how they actually set things up for you.
Yeah. It was actually a great process. I knew the CEO and the private equity for a while because we were operating in the same market, and it made sense strategically. They really had a broader ambition to focus on student success, and they were putting together a number of assets to achieve that, and were lacking the sort of consumer family front end to those sort of assets. And ClassTag really was great. They approached us a number of times before that, and so that was the time. We did run a process, and so I had a banker involved as well, and so strategically that made sense, financially that made sense, and they didn't insist on a long earnout, which was good. I think, frankly, by then I got tired. It was 8 years of solving parent engagement. I was ready to solve something else. But my co-founder was really excited to stay and CTO. And so I think they needed him way more than me, right? And I was honestly happy to help the team transition, and kind of was doing sort of this dual role of just, ensuring nothing drops, right? And sort of the transition is smooth. And I would say probably 9 months or so after that, it was, time to go.
You're ready to move on. Yeah.
Ready to move on. And it was a great experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good because they're not always great.
But it was an upfront purchase, basically. There wasn't like a big contingency.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a pretty clean transaction that way. You weren't tied up for a long time on earnouts or equity. I'm curious, just in kind of reflecting on that process, anything that you'd go back to, your earlier self 8 years prior, and tell her to do or not do, that as you kind of went through the process that you realized would have made it easier or less difficult?
You mean the idea to act, like the whole process?
Yeah, just like, the early in the company decisions you made or ways you approach things that you wish you would have done differently?
Yeah. I think the one fundamental thing, and we'll see, how it's going to work out. I'm starting to think about my next venture. And I think one of the big lessons learned for me is the idea of following the money, which sounds so basic and fundamental to building a business. Yeah. But it is a different starting point from, hey, I've experienced this problem, let me go solve this, and not thinking about monetization. Because so now I'm starting from that. I'm looking at, okay, what are the big sort of pockets of money, who can pay, right? And then that helps me figure out who. And then I say, okay, do I like that who? What do I feel about that who? Because I have to spend with those people a lot of time, like I did with teachers, right? So I need to generally like them at some level. And then from there, I go and spend, my time doing discovery. But I start from money in areas, right? I built a business in K-12 education, which is one of the toughest places to build a business in. Yeah. So clearly that was one thing I didn't do. I didn't follow the money.
Well, and when we say follow the money, meaning finding sort of people that have problems I can impact, and they're willing and able to compensate me for solving those problems. Correct. Because there's lots of problems in the world, and a lot of need to solve problems, but not all those problems can compensate you for the cost of solving them.
Exactly, and in my experience, right, in education, right, so in a way, I saw this problem in parent-teacher communication and collaboration. Yeah. Well, teachers don't have any money, right? They don't not. In terms of their budget, not in terms of their personal wealth, right? They don't go there for, for their
financial success,
fame and wealth, right? There's other things that drive them to that profession, which is another story.
Different podcast.
But, and then, so for us, the path to monetization was very long, right? So, and we were creative, and we figured out, actually, we built the first media business in education, actually, that allowed brand sponsors to sponsor these communities of parents and teachers on ClassTag, and that was absolutely unique. Right, the only company that does it is ClassTag, which is they do it for themselves with their book fairs and their.
I remember them well.
And all of their sort of competitions and whatnot. But that was, or maybe Box Tops, which is like a nonprofit, right? But anyway, it was a unique model. But it meant we had about 2 years from beginning till first monetization, because you can't do sponsorship if you have 100 people to sponsor, right? You need tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or later millions. So we scaled ClassTag. At scale, when we were at 5 million parents and teachers, that was another story. But, it took a minute to get there.
Yeah.
And then we turned on SaaS as well. So,
And going into these new ventures, or kind of as you're kind of working on your next next company, I guess what are some of the lessons learned that you're applying in terms of, either strategically how you're approaching things, or maybe more even personally, like how you're deciding to kind of, show up as a leader or approach this as a leader? Like, what shifts are you making either to be more effective or to make it more personally satisfying, right? Because I think it's the second time around. I find that it's a little less, oh, I'm hungry and I need to like win. It's like I can choose to do it a little differently, and I've got some resources and I've got some experience, and it can be a little more nuanced in terms of what you're going after and why you're going after it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing I would say that in between, sort of in the last 9 months or so, I've been working with a lot of entrepreneurs in 0 to 1 stage, and I'm offering a program that actually goes through the very steps I'm going through now with my second venture, which I found ironically to be so helpful, because not only I went back and reflected on my own experience, I also got a lot of perspective because it forced me to do the proper theory work and get those best practices packaged. So this kind of transition business, and I think I'll still keep mentoring startup founders for a while. It's just so rewarding for me and very therapeutic as well. But beyond that, one thing I realized was actually it mattered more. The most important thing for me was that I had an amazing co-founder. And I really loved working with him because he was an amazing person and an amazing professional. And so as I started thinking about these ventures that I want to do and doing a little bit of digging on my own, I said, the right person's going to come into my life.
You manifest this,
yeah, the magic. I said, I trust that, that person will show up, and I'll meet, someone who has complementary skills and maybe expertise in a particular area that I don't have, right? Which has the money potential or other things. And so again, it's very early days, but I think I realized how important that co-founder is. Yeah. I think that I wouldn't want to do a business alone because it's a very lonely journey, and I certainly benefited from having that incredible partner in crime. So that I think is one realization. The second realization is now knowing that once I decide I can't stop, I better, spend a little bit, maybe more time actually doing the research. So not just jump with 2 feet, but actually do, but also being, I think, realistic that every business has some wrinkles, right? Yeah. There is there is a bit more competition that you would like, or a little less of this or of that, right? So I think and I know a lot of people doing second or third company, they have problems because they want things to be bigger and perfect, and just this level of perfection I don't think really exists. But I also think that I think it still requires the same amount of work, or maybe, right? And I think it would be, again, very naive to think, yes, just because I know more, somehow the work's gonna get done by itself, right? It's just, you still have to, jump through the hoops and walk through walls and do, all the good stuff.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's even, it's harder because now you know what it really takes. I think the first time around, you're just naive and ignorant. And so you just do it anyway. Now he's like, oh, God, I know what this is. I've climbed this mountain. It's like, oh, I don't like climbing another one. It's like, I can't delude myself. Yeah,
and that's why burden of proof is higher, because it has to be worthwhile to go do that. But I realized that I just don't see myself being an employee, or I can't do it anymore.
I think most exited founders are unemployable. Yeah. You just can't. You can't go back to that.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Vlada, this has been a pleasure. We've covered a lot, some great insights. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your stories. If people want to find out more about you and the work that you're doing, what's the best way to get that information?
Thank you, Bruce. It was super fun. And best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there, so you can find Vlada Lotkina. It's a rare combination.
You're the only.
I'm the only one, I think. So you can find me there. Or you can also email me at vlada@elevatorlab.com with an 8.
With an 8, yeah. I'll make sure that I'll get your LinkedIn profile on the show notes so people can get that. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Bruce.